They did a study in Europe of 900,000 people. That's an enormous study. What they discovered is that during a year where there was more advertising happening in a country than had happened the year before, then in the year following, that people were less happy. And that is because the focus of advertising is to make you want what you don't have. And that produces an unhappy feeling.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Don Joseph Goewey, who continues to share the legacy of Anthony De Mello. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. I find a lot of people, even successful people and highly successful people, are trapped by the stories and fears, many of them from childhood, that they've never stopped to question. Still trying to figure out how to integrate inner stillness, outer achievement, and be aware and just be content with the amazing world that we live in and what we do. I've loved Anthony De Mello's work because he tells people to wake up, and he does it in a funny way, and that's always cool. Today, we're joined once again by Don Joseph Goewey. He's the executive director of the De Mello Spirituality Center and the voice behind preserving and expanding Anthony De Mello's teachings. If you've ever struggled with stress, felt weighted down by fear, or wondered why you can't seem to find lasting peace, this conversation is your invitation to wake up. Don's joined us twice before, once in episode 249, where we talked about stop fixing yourself, and then again in episode 328, where he shared the latest tools they have from Anthony De Mello. Welcome back to Richer Soul, Don Joseph Goewey. It's great to have you join us again today.
My pleasure, Rocky.
So let's catch up. It's been a couple years since you've been here. You're with the Anthony De Mello's Institute, and I'd love for you to just kind of tell us what's going on and what you're seeing kind of in a post-COVID world within that.
Well, the De Mello Center, which is under the umbrella of the Center for Spiritual Exchange, that was the nonprofit that Anthony De Mello founded when he was at Fordham. And its job is to manage the archive of his body of work, which is pretty significant, and continue to make that body of work available in all the different ways that the internet makes things available to people and social media makes things available to people, which was unavailable when the center was founded back in 1983. And so we're just kind of digitizing and creating platforms for people to engage with Anthony De Mello's work. And that means taking his writings and creating books that map it out. For example, his famous book, Awareness, was a workshop. And so we've turned that into an audiobook, and we've also mapped it out in book form in A Year with Anthony De Mello. We also took his writings and centered around a major theme of his, which is stop fixing yourself. His message is nothing broken with you. You've just gone asleep. You need to wake up to something magnificent about you that you're missing completely. And so we created a compendium of his writings that center on that. So we continue to do it. And one of the things that we've done recently is a deck of cards that look like this, and they give people the opportunity every morning to read one of his sayings. One of the things from his writing, one of the great things about De Mello is that he discovered the soundbite before the soundbite kind of took over the world. And he's very quotable, like spirituality is about waking up. So that's what we've been doing. We've continued to do that. And we've been surprised over the last 5 years at how much impact it's had. We got 50,000 plus people on our social media, a bit huge email list. We've got 1,000 people participating in a platform where they can engage Anthony De Mello's work. I don't know, almost 500,000 people have listened to the little podcasts. What we've done is taking the recordings of his work and broken them up into small little pieces. So there's a podcast at Podbeam that's free that people can listen to, very popular. And Anthony De Mello's books have continued to be bestsellers, especially Awareness and The Way to Love, which The Way to Love is the one I consider to be a spiritual masterpiece. Well, so was Awareness. And so he got ahead of steam before he died in 1987, and they've maintained it all these years. And so we keep putting things out there. And so that's what we're doing. And the new thing is these cards, the Awareness deck. You can get them at Amazon. The publisher, Simon & Schuster, did a really beautiful job of creating it.
We'll talk about the deck a little later. Is there a lot of video of his work or? Okay.
We've tried to improve it because it is actual video. It wasn't filmed digitally. And it was sitting in boxes for a long time. And then it was turned into digital format. And so the quality isn't what people are now used to, but it's good enough. We post those videos up on our website at demellospirituality.com, and they're very popular. People listen to them. We don't get any complaints saying you need to improve the video, because please, anybody that listens to them out there, we have done all that we can possibly do to improve them, but they're viewable. They're good enough.
And I watched a video of his, I think it was out of Fordham. And then there was another video, which was a series of maybe 4 or 5 videos as well. But that was a while ago. And so I was wondering if there was more content still out there.
We've got it all up on the website.
Okay.
He was commissioned by Catholic universities around the world to do a closed circuit TV presentation of his ideas, his spiritual ideas. And of course, that was captured in video format. And that's very interesting. That was probably part of the 4-part thing that you saw. There's a number of things, and it's easy to access. Just go right to our website. You'll find them there.
Are you noticing more people waking up today than ever? It just seems like there's a shift.
Yes. Ajasanti speaks of that. Ajasanti is well known, at least out here in California, a well-known spiritual master, a man who was a Zen Buddhist for many, many years and experienced enlightenment, although it's not anything he really claims, but sure sounds like it. And he's a wonderful teacher, written some wonderful books. And he's worked with thousands of people. He does workshops that are enormous. And he says after all the years he's been doing this, he's witnessing exactly what you just said. People are waking up. People are having enlightenment experiences more frequently than he saw in the beginning. I think it's true. In my work, I definitely do see it. You can talk to people about spirituality in terms of consciousness more than ever before. It's not so doctrinal as it can get.
I do notice, though, it doesn't lead on the news. Like, you don't see that another person spiritually awoke today.
Yeah,
Maybe one day we'll get the news to catch up.
Maybe maybe Oprah should take over one of the network news that we begin to see it. Well, there's these wonderful stories that come out with CBS Sunday Morning. The wonderful thing about spirituality, of where the rubber really meets the road, is when we make a shift from anxiety that calls us to project judgments and condemnation on other people, which is only being projected from our own self-condemnation and our own fears within ourselves that we haven't dealt with. And when we go through a shift from that subjugation into becoming a kinder person, a less judgmental person, a person who meets other people with empathy, a person that's willing to listen more than to espouse more, as somebody who is also willing to dive into their creative genius, which, they've probably been socialized out of for a long time in order to be a success-driven person out there in the world. I coach doctors who put such a high premium on becoming a doctor or a lawyer, who really wanted to be a musician or a poet or a baseball player, and so they eventually come back to that. They may not come back to it in the way they would have if they had started out that way, but it's a return to yourself. It's a coming home to yourself. That's the spiritual journey. And I see people doing that a lot, making that shift.
You spoke about fear and also how over time it kind of gets programmed out of us. I guess the question is, first, are we put to sleep or are we born asleep?
Well, the research on human nature over the last 20 years has shown that we were born quite awake. We were born highly spiritually endowed. You look at a little infant, and you think that, well, there's a tabula rasa, that blank slate, and it's going to have impressions made on it that's going to determine its character. And yet what the scientists are finding, particularly the ones at Yale when they research infants, is that we are born loving, we're born empathic, we're born altruistic, and we're born socially awake, we're pro-social, not antisocial. All of those traits are within us. We're born with this loving nature. And the research has demonstrated it over and over and over again. And so what happened when you take a look at the world? Why is there so much conflict in the world? Why is there so much anxiety? Why is there so much anger in people and in nations? And the answer is that it's the way we're socialized. And we're socialized at first by our parents, who are socialized by their parents, who are socialized by their parents. And it goes all the way back to people who were socialized were fear conditioned. We're basically fear conditioned from the beginning. We're also given this message from religion very often, but certainly from other parts of our culture, that we're flawed, that we're hopelessly imperfect, that we need a higher authority guiding us. Otherwise, we will turn into something god-awful. And we're entered the school system with its red pencil standards of more interested in what we get wrong than what we get right, and doesn't really encourage us to follow our creative instincts. But it turns out that we're actually born creative geniuses. When they test young children, they test at this very high level of creativity when they're very young. And then by the time they're in their mid-adolescence, they see this decline. And by the time they're young adults, there's even more decline. And by the time they're in their 30s, the decline is pretty remarkable. It is basically the result of not a gradual biological normal reduction brain capacity. It's because we've been talked out of it. We've been talked into believing that there's something wrong with us and that we're never enough. We're also shamed into this feeling like, I'm never enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to succeed enough, because we're programmed by our culture to succeed at all costs. and to define ourselves externally in terms of the job we have, in terms of how much money we have, in terms of the neighborhood we live in, all of that kinds of thing. And we lose everything's external in the way that we look to see ourselves, and we lose the connection inwardly where all these wonderful qualities that we were born with are still there, but dormant. So we got to wake them up again. And when we do wake up, we end up as we come out, we end up seeing an entirely different world, a world that De Mello calls it the kingdom of joy, is what Christ meant when he said, not until you become as little children will you be able to enter the kingdom of joy. Well, he's talking about that original state that we came in with that now science has documented. We have to go back. And it's not going back to being childish, but it does begin with going back to being childlike, to finding that innocence within us, that creativity within us, that childlike joy that's willing to go on an adventure, that childlike joy that's so unforgiving, quickly forgives its buddies for their errors. All of that is what defines spirituality. And we can wake up.
How quick is the process of waking up? It's like when I wake up in the morning, it takes me a couple minutes. But if somebody were to wake up from this long slumber, so to speak, is it a relatively quick process, or does it kind of come in layers of slow awakening, so to speak? Because it's got to be a shock to the system, right?
Absolutely. It's a shock to your belief system is what it is. We believe that the world's a dangerous place. We believe that if we're not careful and, we keep our eye out, that it's going to come down on us. We really do very often see a threatening world, and we misperceive people as a result of that. We misperceive people's intentions and that kind of thing. But waking up can happen in all kinds of ways. There are people who you might regard as miserable, people who can wake up suddenly. They suddenly get it. One of those people I got to know was Byron Katie, who's very big deal. And she describes, she was in a halfway house for depressed people. And she was so miserable to be around that they put her upstairs in the attic and locked the door and told her to work it out. And as she sat there, she had this vision. And the vision was she saw grace or beauty in a female form, in a spiritual form across from her. So dazzled by it, she said she really wanted to impress this goddess that she was perceiving, because she was pinching herself. And she finally realized it's really there. And she noticed that every time she tried to, egotistically improve herself for the goddess to like her better, the goddess would disappear. And as soon as she let that go, the goddess returned. And it turned into this transformational change in her. And it's inexplicable. How do you explain that? This woman who's very depressed, who's locked in a room because nobody can stand her, comes out of this room this completely different person, seeing herself in the world and everybody in it in a completely different way, who goes on to have a worldwide impact on all of us. I mean, her impact has been enormous. Every book she puts out is a New York Times bestseller. Her workshops fill up. And she's very humble about it. And she tells people, there is nothing that happened for me. There's nothing that changed my consciousness that you're not capable of changing for yourself. A lot of the people who have experienced enlightenment, they ask, what was the feeling as you began to realize this had come on? Most of them say embarrassment. And they say, embarrassment, why? And they say, because I was suddenly seeing something that I realized was there the whole time. And I couldn't fathom how I missed it. There it was. I was in a miserable state, seeing a threatening world, and suddenly I was seeing a completely different reality, a loving world, that was imbued with love. That's what they describe. And there's other people who will work for decades on becoming enlightened. Will do all the practices that you can think of and get nowhere. So there's no formula. That's just the way it is. But the thing that leads to it is getting in touch with what you have to wake up from. A lot of people get focused on what they want to wake up to. They want to wake up to greater joy. Of course, they want to wake up to greater creative power, to create the life in the world and the situation that they feel like they're capable of creating. They want to create relationships, especially at home, that aren't full of conflict and upset. They want to be more loving. All of those intentions, and they do things externally. They do yoga, they do meditation, they do all of these practices, which are very good, very fine things to do. And often they don't get anywhere. Well, the problem is you have to come back to what you need to wake up from first. And you don't have to worry about what you're going to wake up to, because once you wake up from what you have to wake up from, which is a brain that has been programmed for fear and negativity, that is not your fault that it's programmed that way, but your responsibility to change. And the only way that you change it is by bringing it into full awareness. And that is a very simple process that initially is very difficult to do. But that's how you wake up. You bring into awareness the thoughts that are turning into the emotion, that are turning into the perspectives, that are having you see a world that's actually not even there because of the lens you're looking through. The lens you're looking through is coloring it. And so you got to get in touch with those things. So every time you notice that you're having a fearful thought and it's turning into tension and anxiety that you're experiencing, stress, in other words, your stress levels beginning to rise, and you sit with it. You literally do not try to change it. You leave it alone. You feel it. You let yourself recognize it. You look at the thought that you were thinking before that generated the negative emotional reaction that you're having, and you don't blame yourself for it. You don't go into self-condemnation, which is usually, what the hell is wrong with me, which is another negative thought producing another unhappy, upsetting emotion. And if you do that, then you just observe that. Look at that thought I put on top of the negative thought that's creating more anxiety and upset inside of me. And De Mello even goes as far as to recommend in this awareness process is you don't say, I am stressed, because your brain takes you literally. Oh, I'm stressed. Well, therefore, there must be a threat. I need to activate the stress response system. I'm going to dump stress hormones into your system that are going to debilitate you. It's going to amp you up. Amp up your negativity, amp up your anxiety. You don't have a stress reaction unless some form of fear is present. And most of the fear that's present is mind-made. It's your thoughts. You think your way into an emotional reaction that produces a stress reaction. And you think it was the world out there did something to me, when in fact, no, it's an algorithm that's playing out inside of you that you're trapped in. And the way you get untrapped is by bringing it into awareness. So De Mello says, you say, there is stress there right now, instead of I am stressed. There is fear there right now. There is anger there right now, whatever it is. And as you do that, you stop identifying with the emotional upset. That's how we get trapped in it. We identify with it. We identify, I'm an emotional mess, or I'm a stressed out person. It holds us in there. But if you don't identify with it, if you just bring it into awareness, it passes. And when it passes, it delivers you to this rather neutral space in which you can choose the experience that you want to have. And the main thing to do at that moment is just relax and be at peace for a moment. Think nothing. And what you will notice is happening is there are things that begin to arise in you that were blocked. And those things are joy, happiness, confidence. You might get a creative insight. So that problem that was causing you to react negatively, once you've moved past it, a creative insight from your right brain hits your prefrontal cortex, and aha, this is what I can do with that. And now what was a problem that was paining you is a challenge that's exciting you. And then you can use stress hormones to empower you forward. Now you're using your brain instead of it using you. And so if you practice that, your brain will begin to change, because one of the things that happens with the way we are programmed by our society and the childhood traumas we experienced in early childhood, what they do is they program into our brain, and they cause what a heightened reactivity in a place of the brain called the amygdala, the brain's fear center. And so now you are predisposed to stress reactions whenever the world doesn't look like the way you want it to look, or whenever your spouse doesn't agree with you about a problem. Though, whatever the situation, your brain has an automatic pilot that is set for emotional negativity. Fear is the highest emotional negativity. It's the mother of all of them. And so your brain's wired for that. And the only way out of it is to rewire your brain. And the only way to rewire your brain is to reprogram it. And so to answer your question, how long does it take to reprogram a brain that society, that mom and dad and schools and everybody since have programmed you into a stress reaction? The way you come out of it is through this awareness process, in which you bring into conscious awareness what's been running you unconsciously by doing nothing with it, not trying to change it, not trying to turn into a positive affirmation, but just by observing it. You begin to calm down. And as you begin to calm down, you begin to quiet down those neurocircuits and synapses within your brain's fear center. They don't go away, but they get quieter. And so it doesn't hijack the prefrontal cortex, where your intelligence is and where it connects with the right brain to give you creative insights and give you positive emotion from that right side. And that takes approximately 6 weeks of doing an awareness practice consistently. And that's some neuroscience research. Richard Davidson at University of Wisconsin identified that.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
What would be an awareness practice?
Awareness practice is just what I said. The very first thing you do is, let me give you an example of how it works, a personal example. I started using this awareness practice. I grew up in a home that was violent, a lot of abuse. My brothers and I were subjected to a lot of abuse. So we grew up with a hyperactive amygdala. We grew up with a hyperactive fear center running us. And so when I got out of that home environment, I entered the world as a young adult, as an angry young man. And so I was always fighting against the world. And so finally reached a point where I had to change it. And so I began practicing this awareness process. I did everything else, Tai Chi, yoga, meditation. It wasn't getting through. I probably wasn't doing it properly. But I came across this awareness process. It spoke to me for some reason, and I started doing it. And the very essential thing is you become hyper aware whenever a negative motion is stirring in you. And it takes a while to begin to do that. We're so programmed to just be on automatic pilot and let the negativity run willy-nilly. And so it took a while for me to get to a point where, okay, there's an upset there. I can feel it, Somebody just said something to me and I'm perceived as insulting and I'm angry and I want to retaliate. I'm watching that. I'm not going to act upon that. I'm just going to sit with it. And I never liked it. I didn't like sitting with it. It was uncomfortable as heck, but I did it. It took a while. Okay, I'm going to sit with it. I got to get past this. And then then I would add the other layers. And I got to be pretty proficient at those other layers. And so one day, I'm walking down the hallway to my office. Everything in my life is going swimmingly well. My books are selling. My workshops are filling up. The people that I'm working with are wonderful people. My wife loves me. My kids love me. There's no conflict in the house. It's been a great couple of months. I have nothing to complain about, which for me is saying something back then because I complained about everything. In fact, what's his name? Suzuki Roshi was asked one time, when will I know that I've become enlightened? His answer was, you will have stopped complaining. Well, when I was doing this awareness, I hadn't actually stopped complaining, but things were so well, I had nothing to complain about. And as I'm walking down the hallway, I suddenly get hit by this feeling of dread. It's kind of gloomy and starts spoiling this good mood that I'm in. And I detect it. And so what I did before I did anything else is I went into my office and I sat down and I sat with it. And I took it through that process. I let myself feel it, and I knew it was dread, and I said, I just said the things you say. Dread is there right now. I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm just going to sit with it. And then as it began to pass, I noticed the thoughts that I was thinking that were behind it. Some of the thoughts were, you can't trust anything. If anything good is happening, you know that something bad's around the corner. And then the most obvious thing that should have been absolutely, totally obvious to me came in kind of sideways. I heard what my stepfather had pounded into me as a kid. He told me, and I'm going to use a swear word, I apologize, but he said, you'll take gold and you'll turn it into shit. Every time, no matter what you ever do, you're going to take gold and you're going to turn it into shit. And he told it to me so much, and I was so impressionable as a kid that I believed it. And I realized what the dread was, that here I was having a golden sort of couple of months. And, well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean everything's all right. That means I'm about to turn it all into crap, right? Who wouldn't dread that? And I realized as I sat there, I had been having that reaction for 20 years and never investigated it, never sat with it, And so the thing about it is that it's not true. I don't do that. I work hard not to do that. In fact, the whole awareness process was moving in that direction. And so the next time I experienced that feeling of dread, because as I said, it doesn't go away. It's programmed into synapses within your brain, but it weakens because the whole point of psychotherapy is to bring what is running you unconsciously and make you consciously aware of it, which takes its power away. And so the first time it maybe doesn't take all the power away, but you're aware. Now you're aware. It's not running you as much. So the next time I had that dread experience, I noticed it. I sat with it. I got through it pretty quick. I knew what it was about. And it finally reached this point when it comes up now, I actually laugh at it. What used to be a tragedy is now a comedy. What that means is I changed my consciousness. And what that also means, I changed my brain. My brain is giving me the room to see that there is a false belief that used to run my life that's not true and doesn't need to run my life anymore. Well, we have layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of that programmed into us. And we have this beautiful nature. The Course in Miracles described it as a state of grandeur that is natural to us. But all that's kind of theoretical, It's, what's that old song? It's nice if you can get it, But the way in which you can get it and shift out of it is to recognize what's obstructing it. And once you remove what's obstructing it, it rises all by itself. It's not blocked anymore. And then you're suddenly incredibly embarrassed, like those enlightened people I talked about is like, I never realized that life could be so good. I never realized there was so much goodness in me. I never realized the world could look like this. And yet it was all there the whole time. I just had this peanut butter. It's like you're wearing these glasses, but you put peanut butter over it. You can't see anything. You can't see reality. And yet you believe that what you're seeing, this smushy world, is reality. It's not reality, it's illusion. So did that answer your question about awareness?
It does. We have a tendency to block ourselves.
Yes.
And you made the interesting comment, and I've heard Michael Singer say something very similar along the lines of, once you clear it, there's nothing to do. It's not like you have to constantly do this work. It's you let go of it, and then it just is. And you don't have to fuss anymore. So life becomes easier when you do the work. But I think for a lot of people, doing the work is difficult. And it's probably fear-based of why they won't. And I know for me, a lot of times, it's just not even having the awareness that it was there. And until you have the awareness, you can't get rid of it and say, let me clean that window.
That's right. And it's simple. For years I'd heard people talk about the secret. You got to find the secret to life. There's no secret. That old thing that God hides things from us. God put everything in absolute plain view, making it simple to remove what may be obstructing it. What could be simpler than all you have to do is to bring those negative impulses that have been programmed into you, that are not your fault, that are causing you to judge yourself in ways that only cause that negative emotional feeling to be there. What could be simpler than bring it into awareness, not try to fix it, not try to change it, to just be with it. Don't identify with it. And you can just simply do it by saying, fear is there right now, instead of I am afraid or I am stressed. And then understand it passes. Everything passes, especially emotions. They pass within a nanosecond. One moment you feel good about something, the next moment you don't. But there's something beyond that, which is the experience of not who you are, but what you are, what's inside of you, that you can surrender to when you find what's blocking it. What could be simpler than an awareness process? The universe made it very simple. And initially, people don't like to do the awareness process because it's uncomfortable. Who wants to sit in the middle of being angry? And yet you're in the middle of it anyway. Who wants to sit in the middle of being stressed? Again, you're in the middle of it anyway. But by sitting in the middle of it, bringing it into conscious awareness is the way you begin to cause an effect in your brain that weakens those synapses that make those reactions automatic to the point that they take you over. And then you do begin to think, I am this angry, stressed, hopeless, unlovable person that deserves whatever punishment might be coming, which is a shame-based way of living, which is about 80% of us, according to Brene Brown. So it's simple. You just got to do it. Once you get acclimated to the process, it's not uncomfortable anymore to sit in the emotion. You actually kind of delightful. Oh, let's look at this. This is interesting because you know what the result's going to be. The result's going to be it's going to liberate you from this. And there's nothing better, more motivating than a good result. And liberation is the most profound result of all. And so as you do it, then this motion come up that you've been blocking, these blocks, these boundaries that you've put around yourself that are limiting you, you're going to be liberated from it. And you know it because you've experienced it. It's not because somebody said it. It's because you sat down and worked with it and found out it works. It works this way. I invite everybody to buy Anthony De Mello's book, Awareness, and read that in there, or stop fixing yourself. Lines it out in very clear steps for you. Very simple.
It sounds simple.
It is simple.
But doing simple isn't always easy.
That's what the confusion comes from, right? I don't know where we ever got the idea simple meant easy. But, simple means you're moving in the direction of making something easy.
Yes.
That's certainly where it ends up, is things are easier because you made them simpler. But at first, simple seems very complex to a complicated mind.
It does, but I've also found in general, people don't like simple solutions. They want a complex solution. They want it to be hard, and they won't accept a simple solution. They're like, oh, that can't possibly work. Human nature.
One of the things De Mello says is that there are two problems. One is that you're asleep. You're really comfortable in your nice warm bed of the way you've been socialized because that's what you know. That's what you think is real. And he said, so that's problem number one, you're asleep. And problem number two is you don't want to wake up. And I certainly found that in all the corporate coaching that I did, that initially that's what you run into people. I would teach people this process, for example, of awareness or some other process. And the next session, they'd come back and I said, what was the effect of doing the exercise or that practice? Oh, I didn't get around to doing it. I'll get around to it next time. And it goes on like that for the first 3 or 4 until I say, unless you're going to try these things, you're wasting your money here because this is what I will be bringing to you. And eventually then people, when they begin to step into it, they're really surprised at how much control that awareness gives them. What De Mello says is absolutely true. What you are unaware of controls you. What you are aware of, you control. And when people begin to regain that control by using this awareness process, control over their emotional state, they begin to experience a feeling of liberation. Suddenly all of these wonderful feelings start to emerge that have been blocked. And I mean, who doesn't want that? And so at those sessions, they're very thankful that they stepped into it. But it takes a while.
It does. Do the cards help with that?
Yes.
Why don't we explore a couple of cards just to get an idea?
Okay. I hope I pick cards that emphasize the So with a deck of cards, here's what the box looks like. You come in a box like that. And inside's a little booklet that lays out how you can use it, make some suggestions. You can use it any way you want. So here's one card. It does work with what we've been talking about. So, let's say this is the next one that rolls up for you today. And you read it. And it says, you are always dissatisfied with yourself, always wanting to change yourself. You suffer when you compare yourself with others who you see have achieved what you have not and have become what you are not. Well, that's suffering. That's not a happy place. And it goes on this next card. This was so true for me. You could change everything in yourself you think needs changing, from your looks to your personality, your career, your bank account, and you can still be unhappy. Deep down, this is true, but still you waste your effort trying to get what you know cannot make you happy. And that has to do with succeeding. Succeeding is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with succeeding, but it won't make you happy. You can double your bank account. That's wonderful, but it won't make you happy. Happiness comes from within. It doesn't come from with the world. It's not the world's job to make you happy. Actually, it's the world's job to give you problems, and it's very good at doing that. But it's your job to make you happy, and that's to release this. And that's what we do. You can chase all these things that are out there in the world, chase your happiness externally. Everybody ends up in a midlife crisis where they understand it didn't work. It's what Tony Robbins says, that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure in life. Then you have to ask, well, if it doesn't come from success, where does it come from? Well, it comes from inside you. Well, how do I get to that inside me? By bringing into awareness how I'm blocking it with a simple process.
Well, I was going to say, the card gives you a saying, and then what? So now I read it. Now I'm like, damn, now what?
Well, the thing about it is that when you read this little book, it will orient you to the awareness process. So you're doing this awareness process, and these cards contain the things that are underlying the negativity that's working you over, that's running your life. These cards are helping bringing that into awareness. That's why it's called the awareness deck. It assumes that you are working towards becoming more consciously aware of the negativity that's afoot in your life that's blocking this beautiful, happy, joyful, creative nature that you're not getting to. It's not your constant experience of life. This is like reminding you of those ways in which that gets blocked. One definite way it gets blocked is when you start going around comparing yourself to other people. The chances are you're going to lose every time. And that's always been my experience when I compare myself to somebody else. I either lose by being plagued with an inferiority feeling, or I lose by being plagued with a superiority feeling, both of which are nonsense. Both of which have nothing to do with establishing what's really meaningful, which is my connection to another person, making that first and foremost. That's what this card does. And then we get to a positive message. This one says, there's not a single moment in your life when you do not have everything that you need to be happy. Think about that for a minute. The reason that you are unhappy is that you are focusing on what you do not have rather than on what you have right now. That's a matter of dealing with what in spirituality is called attachments. Attachment is the belief that without this thing or that person or without this outcome, you name it, you cannot be happy. And so I do an exercise with people where I tell them right at the top of the piece of paper, I cannot be happy until or unless. And be surprised how many things people write. I cannot be happy until I'm out of debt. I cannot be happy until my psychotherapist cures my neurosis. I cannot be happy until my boss appreciates all the great things I am doing. I cannot be happy unless I get that promotion. I cannot be happy until I make a ton of money. All of those things. And what the Buddha, beginning with the Buddha, found is that these are called attachments. They're the source of all suffering. One of the things that makes watching a sporting event so miserable and so stressful is you're deeply attached to your team winning, and you don't exactly enjoy the game. If you step back, of course you want your team to win. It's delightful. But if you step back a few paces, like the announcers are, even the announcers who are announcing solely for that team, they're a little more objective and they're enjoying the display of talent they're seeing. But your attachment to your team winning will make that game miserable for you. Here's another card. As I said, that as you move through the making consciously aware of what's subjugating you, what's got you in prison emotionally, as you move these higher, more wonderful states begin to emerge naturally. And so people who are pursuing enlightenment don't have to worry about that. No matter what you do, you're headed in the right direction. And so De Mello, you pick up this card, he says, don't fret about enlightenment. No matter which direction you turn, you are homeward bound. And think about that for a moment. If you related to this moment, to this day, is that no matter what, no matter which direction you're going today, you're homeward bound. In psychology, Carl Rogers Maslow called that the directional tendency. We have a tendency built into our nature that's directing us towards our complete development as a human being. So that's always present within you. And so he's underlining that. And then on attachments, this last one I'll read, he says, stop for a moment and contemplate the endless list of attachments that you have become a prisoner to, striving to rearrange the world around you so that you can attain and maintain the objects of your attachment. This is an exhausting task and also an impossible task in an ever-changing world that you simply are not able to control. So instead of a life of serenity and fulfillment, you are doomed to a life of frustration, anxiety, worry, insecurity, suspense, and tension. And so it's all reminders of these obstructions of trying to be what society said who you should be, what you should want, how you should live, all those kinds of obstructions that have you looking externally for a more enlightened way of living. And these are reminders of what those are and how you bring those back into an awareness process is one way of liberating yourself from that.
And it is a practice and it does take work, but it's not that hard.
No.
Well, let me ask, are people okay sitting with themselves? Or is that a difficult task?
Not in the beginning. I mean,
Okay.
when you go for a walk, or like when I was younger and I go for runs, but when you're about to go to the gym and do an exercise, if anybody out there is like me, something in me is saying, I don't want to do it. I want to stay here, right here on the couch, or I just don't want to get down there on the floor and do all of those deep core exercises. I don't want to get on the treadmill and torture myself. But once you get there and you push through that, and you get into the flow of it, and you get the result that brings you, then you keep going. But it may be that, half the time you do meet with this inner resistance of your ego telling you, we really don't want to do this. This isn't fun. This is painful. But the more you do it, there are people who get to a point where it's their joy. And I will tell you that this awareness process is a delight for me. I'm tickled every time I run into it. I'll hear something. It may give me a little bit of pause. I may find myself going, well, we'll get to that in an hour. Right now, I'm too busy. Well, my experience is I never get to it in an hour. Sit down with it. The awareness process takes all of 3 minutes. Everybody's got 3 minutes unless they're in a real and present danger.
It is true. You just have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to want the change that ultimately turns out to be no change. It's just coming home to what you are already, but you've been blocked from seeing.
And that's a big part of what I'm learning is the concept of subtraction. I don't need anything more. I just need to put down all the things I don't need anymore.
Very nicely put. I like that.
I think we're just programmed to want more or another solution instead of to letting go of everything that's essentially not me, being okay with that.
They did a study in Europe of 900,000 people. That's an enormous study. What they discovered is that during a year where there was more advertising happening in a country than had happened the year before, then in the year following, people were less happy. And that is because the focus of advertising is to make you want what you don't have. And that produces an unhappy feeling. And a lot of the ways that they make you want that thing is they cast you in a pretty poor light. They show, now there's this kind of person that looks this way and is having these experiences, but you're not having them, and they characterize the deficit person as very unappealing. And so that gets programmed in. And for the next year, people in that country that were bombarded with that stuff felt a little more depressed or less happy. That's incredibly telling, isn't it? And it's incredibly telling about attachment. So like you said, don't listen to those ads and really take an honest look at, do you really need this? But you can want those things too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going out and you can fill yourself up that you end up moving to your garage and then you move to the dumps. You certainly can do that all you want. I certainly have, but just don't make the mistake thinking that those objects out there in the world can make you happy. That's the mistake we make. It's not in their nature to make you happy. It's only in your heart.
Simplest thing is just turn off all the noise and be done. And then you don't have these problems.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. If people would like to learn more about the center and about the cards, where should they go?
Well, they can go to our website, demellospirituality.com. And there's all kinds of materials. If you go to the bottom of the page, you hit a button and it takes you to Facebook, Instagram. And we also have a platform called DeMelloCommunity.com, which is kind of like a DeMello Center little Facebook where people can interact with each other. And they can buy the cards and buy DeMello's book on awareness. And those two things together will be like going to a great workshop.
That it will. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Rocky.
Again, we cover the topic of happiness. And it's not something you have to chase, but something that's been there all along, just waiting for you to notice. Freedom doesn't come from adding more, but from removing what no longer serves us. Fear, comparison, all that old programming, those noises in our head. What about you? Have you woken up? You ready to align your inner peace with your outer success? That's what it's all about. Do you know somebody who might also want to do that and would benefit from this episode? Would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Next week, we've got Matthew Mitchell on to talk about Are You Ready to Win? It's about the power of preparation. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.